What is up, everybody? Welcome to the MMA Engine and welcome to Probability for UFC 279. We have Khamzat Chimaev going against Nate Diaz. Should be a very fun card. As always, I am here with Uncle Weezy. Weezy, what is up? You looking forward to this pay-per-view?
Yeah, this is a good one, man. There's there's fights all over this card that are compelling for different reasons, but we get to see the return of Khamzat. We've got a really good co-main event between a couple of guys who are pretty much never in boring fights. Some interesting ones. We've got the return of the Pleasure Man. We've got we've got the Obese Bowl here with Collier versus Barnett. We got the debut of Danielle Wolfe here in the UFC. So it's an interesting card, definitely, and it gets a lot more interesting, Brady, when we figure out ways to stack cash tickets like flapjacks on these things. So let's look at the numbers. Let's break down these fights and let's see if we can figure out some ways to beat these bookies with a bag of oranges until we juice them.
Let's do it. That is always the goal. Do want to shout out the chat before we get started. We are here on a Tuesday, typically going live on a Monday, but we had some other things going on. But yeah, doing it now here on Tuesday. We got Bob, first one in the chat. What is up, Bob? We got Quaver in here, Grateful Dude, MMA Propaholic, Victor, Dope Space Cowboy. We got Andy G. We got UFC Egg with the PRP of probability. Love it. And we got Kyle Marley in the chat. What is up, Kyle? And also we have Dave. Appreciate you all hanging out. If you guys have not already, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Let us keep growing the MMA engine. All right, we will start with the very first fight on the card, and we have a very interesting one. We have Darian Weeks going against Johan Lianes. We have the over-under is set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds is plus 120. The under 2.5 rounds is minus 150. Looks like they have the over under 1.5. The over 1.5 is minus 163. The under 1.5 is plus 120. The fight goes to decision is plus 130. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 175. It looks like BetOnline still does not have props out for 5 of the fights, and this is one of those 5, and it looks like Betway are some of the lines we're going to be using for these first couple fights here. But Weezy, what is sticking out on the very first fight of the night?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of finishers here, right? We've got, for instance, we can see that Weeks here, 5 of 5 finishing his wins, and Lianes 6 of 8. So 11 of these guys, 13 combined pro wins have finished inside the distance. That's about 85%. And one of their 3 combined losses has finished inside the distance. That's 33%. So we've got, a 75% finish rate for these two guys. And then if we look at the UFC level, 2 of their 4 combined fights have finished inside the distance. So we're going to look a little bit more at the benchmarks here and how they compare to the implied probabilities rather than how the fighter finish rates compare to the implied probabilities here, because we don't have a very big sample size. But as we could see right here, Brady, minus 14.76%, minus 15.32%, and minus 12.17%. Now look at how ugly this under 1.5 here is, Brady. Minus 12, minus 20, and minus 8.28. So this line is just brutally overpriced right now at plus 120 for the under 1.5. And there's a couple different reasons for this. Number one, Lianes gets a lot of early finishes, but we've never seen Darian Weeks finished as a pro. And he's fought a couple of really tough guys here at the UFC level. And he's also got a ton of amateur fights in which he's never been finished as well. And then we do know that Lianes, has been working on his cardio, but in the past, we've seen him start to breathe kind of heavy. And I don't know whether it's a cardio issue. I would assume it's more of a pacing issue, because you see the way that this dude throws his strikes. He's trying to kill everybody with every strike that he throws. And it's just not possible to keep up that kind of a pace for 15 minutes. You can't throw 100% power into every strike and think that you're going to last at this level pushing a 15-minute pace here. So this over 1.5 over here, right? Minus 163, Brady, that's about a 62% implied probability. We know that about 67.5% of these fights are going over 1.5 in this division. We know that when we compare their over 1.5 rates to the implied probability of the line, we could see that 3 of their 4 combined fights have went over 1.5 rounds at the UFC level, and 8.28% is the difference between the over 1.5 rate for the division and how these guys go over 1.5. So this trifecta right here of 3 positive numbers is something that is telling me the over 1.5 is the way to go. And then when you look at it stylistically, Brady, right? Weeks is tough to finish, and Lianes is very front-loaded. And we've seen Weeks finish all of his regional scene competition, but here at the UFC level, it's a different story. So I like the over 1.5 here because I think that Weeks' durability can get us past the early storm when Lianes is the most dangerous. And that if Lianes has improved his cardio enough, that he should easily be able to go over 1.5 in this fight because he's a pretty durable dude as well. It's just he ran out of gas against Gabe Green, but Gabe Green puts a different pace on his opponents than Darian Weeks does. So I am going to go with the over 1.5 here at minus 163 as a very solid bet, something that I'm going to be looking at this week. And if we could find it better than that once it starts opening in other places, even better.
Yeah, and I think we might as well find it better because right now on 5 dimes they have the over under 1.5. The over 1.5 is only minus 155, and the under is under 1.5 is plus 125. So curious to see what Bovada and DraftKings gets it out at. Bet online right now they have it at 2.5. I don't think they're going to move to 1.5, but DraftKings for sure is going to get that 1.5 out, and hopefully sometime tonight or early tomorrow. Because I'm right there with you. I think it just makes a ton of sense. Obviously, the only thing I have to worry about is Johan throws with a ton of power and hits like an absolute truck. And but you're right, Weeks has never been knocked out. He has, I think, like high 20s between pro and amateur fights. Never been knocked out. I think his one stoppage loss was either like a cut stoppage or a corner stoppage. But he's super, super tough. So yeah, I think this does go over 7.5 minutes. I personally think this can even go really late into the fight, potential decision as well. So I'm right there with you. I think that over 1.5 is a very solid look to start off the card. Just got to worry about those first couple minutes with Johan, but I think Weeks is tough enough to survive and get this extended. All right, moving on to the next fight, we have Melissa Martinez going against Elise Reed with the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 minus 275. The under 2.5 is plus 215. The fight goes to decision is minus 225. The fight doesn't go to decision is plus 163. Yeah, I think this is one I'm staying away from the time props perspective. I'm kind of more interested in a money line side here, but let's kind of see what these numbers say for these time props.
Yeah, so we got some big plus money number here for the violence bets, plus 163, plus 215, plus 300. And if we look at their stats, right, we can see that Melissa Martinez only has 7 pro fights. 5 of them have finished inside the distance. For Reed, it's 4 of 7. So 9 of their 14 combined fights have finished inside the distance, about 64.3%. And Melissa Martinez making her debut at the UFC level. She's coming out of the Combate organization. So we've got Reed. 2 of her 3 fights have finished inside the distance. She's been finished in her 2 losses, and she won by decision versus Corey McKenna. So these are 2 strikers here. They're going to fight at distance, at range. Neither one of them really looks to get takedowns. They both have more of a traditional martial arts background here. And when we see the unders are a little bit overpriced here, because we've only got 3 fights for Reed, the UFC numbers balanced against these implied probabilities and the divisional finish rates, they don't mean as much as this row right here, which is the long-term finish rate for the division at 115 pounds for 3-round fights compared to the implied probability of the line. And we see we're overpaying by 7.25% for the fight doesn't go. We're overpaying by 4.6% for the under 2.5. And we're overpaying by 3.73% for the under 1.5. And funny enough, the fight goes to decision at minus 225. That's a 69.23% implied probability. Would you believe me, Brady, if I told you that line was priced perfectly and that the fight goes to decision 69.23% of the time exactly since the beginning of 2013? Let's scroll down here and see if we see that. Yeah, 69.23%. So you want to talk about a perfectly priced line. It's minus 225 for the fight goes to decision here, man. Now, only one of their 3 fights has went to decision, so it's overpriced by 35.9% based on that. But I would say that would be the side I would rather be on, because when we see these numbers, which are the ones that are compared to the long-term finish rate for the division, we see that these at 0%, negative about 0.5%, and negative 3% are less overpriced when you compare it to -7, -4, and almost -4. So I would say the fight goes to decision at -225, or even the over 2.5 at -275. That's how I would attack this one, simply because the stylistic matchup here is striker against striker. And I don't think either one of these ladies is really getting knocked out on the feet ever in their career. Melissa Martinez is undefeated. Elise Reed has never lost outside of the UFC. And when she did lose inside the UFC, it was because she got stuck on the bottom. And that's because she fought fighters like Eubanks and Hughes, who took her down and took advantage of that massive hole in her game. We haven't seen that on tape yet from Melissa Martinez, the ability to be able to take fights to the ground and put them down there and finish them down there. So I'm looking for this fight to go the distance, to go over 2.5. And I think that I'd rather just leave out the extra 2.5 minutes and throw that -275 over 2.5 pretty far down in the PRP this week.
Yep, no disagreement for me. I think that's a great point. When Elise Reed is getting finished, it is on the mat, and Melissa Martinez did not go for takedown. Striker versus striker, 115 pounds. I think this one does go to decision as well. Not something I'll be playing, but like you said, for the PRP, definitely a solid parlay piece at -275 for that over. All right, we'll move on to the next fight. We have Alatang Lee going against Chad and Hellinger. We have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is -175. The under 2.5 rounds is +145. The fight goes to decision -163. The fight doesn't go to decision is +120. So we see that Alatang Lee has been finished Chad and Hellinger has been finished a ton. I think he's been finishing all of his losses and all of those coming by submission. It's just, I don't know if Alatang Lee is going to go out there and submit Chad and Hellinger. And you take a look at Hellinger's losses, all of them or most of them are like really, really early in his career. Both guys seem extremely tough, and Hellinger never been knocked out. Alatang Lee is tough as they come as well. I kind of like this one to go over, but I'm curious to see what the numbers say about this one, Weezy.
Yeah, so and Hellinger is a guy whose career started off 2-5, right? And in those 5 losses, he had gotten beaten by a couple of guys from the Champions Creed gym up there in Canada. So what he had done was he was serious about getting better, and he had gotten beat up pretty bad by a couple of these Champions Creed guys. So he went there hat in hand saying, I think you guys can make me a better fighter. They handed him a white belt. They told him he was going to start from the bottom, and they reworked his game. And now the new Champions Creed version of Chad Hellinger is on a 10-fight winning streak, Brady. So it's a different fighter than what we saw from the guy who has started off 2-5 and had been submitted in all 5 of those pro losses. So now we got a situation where if we look at the long-term benchmarks here, we're seeing that the violence bets are a little bit underpriced. And look at how overpriced these over bets are: 11.21%, 6.77%, and 8.71%. But we see these big plus numbers here when we're comparing these guys over numbers at the UFC level to the long-term benchmark and to the divisional benchmark and to the implied probability here. So it's definitely, we're seeing that these guys have been going to decision, and but we don't have a lot of fights, right? Only 7 of them. So we got a 7-fight UFC sample size, and they're finishing inside the distance about 28.57% of the time. But what we do have is a 42-fight sample size for these guys as a pro, and what's telling us there is that about 64.3% are finishing inside the distance. So these guys are finishing more outside the UFC than they are at the UFC level. But, these numbers here are a little bit alarming, even in the 7-fight sample size, which is small, to tell you that, if we're betting that violence, we kind of need more than a 1.5% break, a 2.3% break, a 3.8% break in order to bet violence bets when only 2 of these guys' 7 combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance. And even at Hellinger's recent finish against Jesse Strader came in the 3rd round. But Alatang just did finish a fight in the 1st round. So the over 1.5, definitely overpriced when comparison to the benchmark. These are overpriced in comparison to the benchmark quite a bit. But but the over 2.5, according to these two numbers here, is probably the best priced bet at minus 175. It's just that I don't think I can touch this one. I would probably bet the unders and just look for a little bit of regression, knowing that they are a little bit underpriced here and that Alatang's got power in his hands and Hellinger's got power in his hands. And neither one of these guys wrestles that much. So maybe what we'll see, instead of Hellinger's 2 fights against Gafarov, where it was basically just a grappling match, and the same thing against Strader, where it was just basically a grappling match where Strader was wrestling him a lot early in that fight. If these two guys kind of stand in front of each other and bang, I think I'm more inclined to bet the unders and the fight doesn't go. But I still feel like we could get better prices. I still feel like we could get 130, 140 for fight doesn't go. We could get 150, 160 for under 2.5. It's just not there yet. So neither one of these sides is really calling me.
Yeah, it's one of those where my eyes are telling me that this goes the distance, but the numbers kind of scare me away, seeing that in Hellinger's finished 83% of his wins, and seeing that Alatang has actually been finished like in 4 of his 8 losses, 3 by knockout. And of course, and Hellinger has been finishing all his losses as well. So yeah, I think, like my eyes are saying this goes the distance, but the numbers are kind of scaring me away from especially laying chalk on the fight goes or the over. So I think this is one where I'm just going to sit back and kind of watch the fight. Nothing I don't really want any action on. The over 1.5 in this fight looks like on 5 dimes they have it at over 1.5 is minus 312. So I mean that's it's chalky. So I think it's one I'm just completely content on passing on.
Yeah, I'm pretty content to pass on this one too. But if you put a gun to my head, I would take the fight doesn't go at +1. No, I think I'd take the under 2.5 at +145. But I just don't like any of these lines. I really think you should get more plus money if you're betting the violence side here, especially as 5 of their 7 combined UFC efforts have went the distance. So it's a big stay away for me. But if I had to put something in the PRP, it would be that under 2.5, way down there in the PRP.
Yep, makes sense to me. All right, moving on, we have Norma Dumont going against Danielle Wolfe. We have the over/under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 minus 225. The under 2.5 rounds is +185. The fight goes to decision minus 200, and the fight doesn't go to decision is +150. This is one where I think I would look at violence just due to the fact that Danielle Wolfe, she has that boxing background. She is a white belt in BJJ. Norma Dumont, brown belt in BJJ. I feel like Norma Dumont should get on top here, do some serious damage, and probably finish the fight. So yeah, for me, it's probably looking at that violence at some decent plus money. But yeah, curious to hear what the numbers say. It's kind of a weird one because we only have a 1 fight sample on the Danielle Wolfe side, and she did go the distance in the Contender Series. She did get hurt pretty bad in that 2nd round, but she did go the distance nonetheless. So kind of a weird one here, Weezy. Are the numbers saying anything on this one?
I think I saw somebody post Danielle Wolfe's boxing record, and I think she's got like something like twice as many wins as losses. Let's say she's 20-10, or 30-15, or 40-20. I think she has 0 knockouts in her wins, and that she's never been finished in her losses. So yeah, we got 1 UFC fight that went the distance, and she got clipped at one point in there, and actually kind of came back, handled it pretty well. The problem with this one, Brady, is that this is actually at 145. Danielle Wolfe's a 145, or so is Norma Dumont now. But I keep the 135. See up here, we're actually using the 135-pound stats. And let me just explain why. If we go over here to the analytics for 3-round fights, I have the featherweights highlighted here. There's only 16 fights, There's 16 fights, so the data just doesn't mean that much. But it's important to know that featherweight fights that are 3 rounds are finishing at a 56.25% clip,
Wow.
right? And I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I should go back here. And so if they're finishing at a 56% clip, but we're only paying 40%. So that's something to keep in mind, because bantamweight fights finish at about a 36.36% rate. So we're actually overpaying a little bit when we compare to the bantamweight, but we're actually underpaying by 16% when we compare this to the featherweight finish rate for 3-round fights. And you mentioned it. Even though Norma Dumont's a striker at the UFC level, she hasn't mixed in the grappling all that much. She seems to be fighting her best fights when she's keeping fights standing. This is going to be different. This is where we're going to be able to see how well-rounded Norma Dumont is, because she's now going to have to become the grappler. And we haven't seen her really be put in that situation yet where she came out with a grapple-heavy game plan. And I think she's going to need to do that if she wants to make Danielle Wolfe uncomfortable. So, Brady, if this is a striker versus grappler matchup, if we're getting at plus 150, a fight doesn't go to decision, which is actually underpriced in comparison to the benchmark for featherweight fights at 16.25%. And we could see maybe Wolfe landing a big shot on the feet. We could see Norma Dumont getting a takedown using that brown belt in BJJ in order to get a submission here against the former boxer. I think that I would have to lean towards the violence here because we don't have enough of a sample size from these two ladies. And I just don't want to pay minus 200 for a debuting fighter with one mixed martial arts professional fight. And she almost actually got finished in the second round there by Tanisha Tennant, or third round. I forget what round Tennant got beat.
I think second, yeah.
It was the second, yeah. She got clipped there on the feet. So I think I would have to lean violence here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's a sneaky one because in theory, like Norma Dumont's going to have a massive advantage on the mat. A Propaholic is bringing it up. She only has 2 finishes in her career, but yeah, like I said, in theory, she's going to have such a big advantage that I don't think it's really going to matter. Dumont inside the distance is interesting. It's plus 200. Fight doesn't go plus 150. It's definitely where I would look. I think it's a sneaky spot here. Norma Dumont's minus 425, which it's ridiculous, but they are implying that she has over an 80% chance to win. And if she's having success, you got to think it's going to be on the mat. So, I think it's violent. And I think it might be a bet for me, honestly. Maybe even a small bet, because I think, like I said, in theory, she's going to have a huge advantage down there. Wolfe, she's now 39, turning 39, I think a little bit close to fight day. She has, I think, like almost a 2-year layoff at this point. Dumont, much younger, extremely thick, and she has that brown belt. So, yeah, Dumont inside the distance is something I'm looking at, and just the fight doesn't go in general, I think is extremely sneaky.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something, man. We can see that Norma Dumont, when she puts on those UFC shorts, that she's a well-rounded lady. Yes. What we're going to find out, Brady, is if she's a well-rounded fighter on Saturday. Because if she is, she goes right out there and starts wrestling right away. Why let Danielle Wolfe be comfortable for even a second here if you have this big perceived advantage on the ground? So, well-rounded ass, we're going to find out if she's a well-rounded fighter. So I hope she's got both.
And I hope she has some brains too, because it's so freaking obvious. Take this fight down to the mat, you win the fight. That's why the line is lined where it's at, because she has such a big advantage on the mat. It is up to Norma Dumont whether she chooses to go that route, and I think she does. So, yeah, I do like some violence in that fight. All right, Weezy, we have the people's main event. We have Jake Collier going against Chris Barnett, the fight that everybody's talking about. We have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 minus 115. The under 2.5 rounds is a minus 115. The fight goes to decision plus 105. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 135. This is a heavyweight fight, kinda. they're two guys that probably should be fighting at light heavyweight at the very least. We know Jake Collier's fought at middleweight. Barnett, he's 5'9", but they are heavyweights nonetheless. Jake Collier, not really a finisher thus far in the UFC, but I feel like if he does get this fight down to the mat, he's going to have such a significant advantage. We saw what he did to Chase Sherman. Barnett, horrible takedown defense, horrible submission game. I feel like Jake Collier on top is live for a ground and pound of submission. And then Barnett is live for that, what do you call it, the spinning fat kick.
Yeah,
if that lands,
kick, yes.
You could definitely put out Jake Collier. So, and on top of that, they're both going to be completely gassed within the first 5 minutes. So, if anything here, it's the fight doesn't go to decision. Of course, it could be one of these sloppy heavyweight fights where they're both gassed out and just doing a lot of nothing. But I feel like there is a decent chance for this one to finish, and you're not paying a ton for it. considering it's a heavyweight fight. So Weezy, I'm curious to see what the numbers say about this one, because this is one that I have a ton of interest in.
Yeah, and when I put together the prop template for this one, that's what stuck out was this left side, the violent side here, as we can see, because we don't have much of a sample size for Barnett, right? But what we do know is that it doesn't go at minus 120. Fights don't go at heavyweight about 63% of the time. We're only paying 54%, so that's a nice 8.4% advantage. The under 2.5 at minus 115 is really cheap too. But that's, we'd rather just get that fight doesn't go because we're getting the extra 2.5 minutes and we're only up paying by 1%. So if you like the under 2.5 at minus 115, don't bet it. Bet that fight doesn't go at minus 120. You should have to pay up about 5 to 6% here. We're only paying up about 1%. So definitely take the fight doesn't go if you're on the violent side here. And the under 1.5 underpriced by about 5.33%. And then when we compare Collier's numbers here to it, we're even underpaying by 12% and 6.64%. And that's because one of Barnett's fights is finished under 1.5 rounds. And or I believe two of them have. I think Rothwell might have got him out of there under 1.5 rounds. So yeah, man, the violent side is what's sticking out here because it's not overpriced. You have a hard time finding heavyweight fights where the violence is underpriced. And in this case, it is. So I think that I would be leaning unders here. And in addition to that, even if Collier doesn't wrestle, let's say, both of these guys, I think, kind of do their best work on the feet. Collier's a good boxer, and Barnett's a tricky kickboxer. He's surprisingly athletic for a fat guy, and he throws some really odd attacks. So it's going to be a fun fight to watch. I think you see these numbers here, Brady. Overpriced by 15.3% for the fight goes. Overpriced by 12.23% for the over 2.5. Overpriced by 12.6% for the over 1.5. That's all too much. It goes to show you that people are saying, you know what? Probably neither one of these guys is good enough to knock the other one out. So just be aware if you are buying those overs, if you're buying the fight goes, you're overpaying by more than 10% when you compare it to the long-term benchmark for the heavyweight division. So, and then even here, when you compare the fighter finish rates and the under 2.5 or the over rates here for these three fighters, they're overpriced there. So it's got to be the violent side, and it's got to be the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 120.
Yep, as I might be betting that, man. I mean, on Bovada right now, they made a mistake. Right now on Bovada, they have the under 2.5 rounds at minus 120, and they have the fight doesn't go to decision at minus 120. So I might be jumping on that minus 120 there on Bovada. Yeah, I think there's a good chance this fight does finish. And, Collier, it looks like he's landing hard. Like the power hasn't really translated yet at heavyweight. But, Barnett, his gas tank's horrible. He gets hurt very easily. He shells up. He runs away during the fight. And if Jake Collier gets on top and Barnett's tired, I think he can definitely finish the fight. So, yeah, I would love Jake to go for takedowns here. I think it's a big path to victory. So, yeah, I do like the minus 120 fight doesn't go. It is something I am very, very much considering. But I think we can move on to the next fight. We have Jamie Pickett going against Dennis Tiuliulin. We have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 rounds, minus 148. Looks like some money just came in on that. The under 2.5 rounds is plus 118. The fight goes to decision is minus 120. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 110. Kind of a weird one here. I personally do like the Dennis side. I like Dennis by knockout. It kind of seems like a little bit of a hot take considering Jamie Pickett is pretty tough and durable. I think both guys are durable. When Dennis is losing, more often than not, it is by submission. I'm not sure Jamie Pickett's really going to go out there and take him down and submit him like, Kizrev did in his last fight. But if I had to pick here, it would be the violent side here at minus 110. But I'm kind of looking at this fight more so from a money line perspective or like a prop perspective. I like the Dennis KO here at plus 325. But yeah, if anything, it's violence here. At about a pick and Weezy, what's sticking out on this fight?
Yeah, I mean, the prop template really is the star of the show here. But, a lot of times, Brady, we just get these fights where it's like, okay, Tiuliulin Pickett, what do we do here? On one side, you kind of have Pickett, who's not much of a finisher at this level, who fights kind of at a slow pace, is happy to put his opponent up against the fence and try to win minutes there in a slow grinding type of match. In particular, I think about that Staropoli fight, which was just awful. But just so much of it took place up against the cage. But the prop template's telling us here with a trifecta here for the fight doesn't go, and a much chunkier trifecta here for the under 2.5. And then when we compare the lines here to the under 1.5, man, I mean, these guys, 19%, 19%, and 0.27%. So we've got 3 trifectas here for the unders. So the template is telling us that these lines are overpriced when we compare them, A, to the long-term benchmark of the division. B, when we compare the fight doesn't go under 2.5, under 1.5 rates to the implied probability of the line. And when we compare how these guys are going under 1.5, 2.5, and fight doesn't go in comparison to the division as a whole, all plus numbers everywhere. So it's just telling you, okay, you might want to bet. You might say fight goes to decision. Just know that you're overpaying. This over 1.5 at minus 250 is horrifically overpriced. 19% when you compare it to the divisional over 1.5 rate. 27% when you compare the implied probability of the line to how often these guys are going over 1.5, which is actually 45% of the time. It's not enough. And then 8.07% here. So all of these non-violence lines are definitely overpriced. The violence lines are underpriced. And if you think that Tiuliulin can land a big shot here on Pickett, Pickett's durability ain't what it used to be, man. He's tapping out with 1 second left in the first round against Dawkins. He's getting stopped. I don't think he's as durable as we thought he was when he first came into the UFC. He does fight at a slow pace, but the one thing we have seen is when Pickett lands something big, he will go after that finish. So I'm leaning the fight, but also I have to say that this fight, the under 2.5 at plus 118 is much better priced in comparison to the fight doesn't go. So under 2.5 plus 118 is probably how I would play this one.
Yeah, I would lean that way as well. Under 2.5 plus 118. The fight doesn't go minus 110 on Bet Online, and then that fight doesn't go is minus 108 on Bovada as well. And let's see what 5 Dimes has it at. 5 Dimes has the fight doesn't go also at minus 110. So yeah, I'd be leaning violence as well. I think it's a pretty solid spot there. I know Jamie Pickett fights really suck to watch, but I'm hoping Dennis makes this one exciting because he does like to come forward. He does like to brawl. And we don't typically see Pickett in that type of a fight. So it should be a fun one. All right, moving on. We have Jailton Almeida going against the pleasure man, Anton Turkalj. Cannot wait for this one. We have the over-under is set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 rounds is plus 125. The under 1.5 rounds is minus 155. The fight goes to decision is plus 300. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 400. I made a pretty big mistake here. I was sitting there, I think it was on Sunday or Monday, and I see the under 1.5 at plus 100. I thought, man, people really like these over 1.5s. They're really always betting these overs. I thought I could just maybe sit back and wait, and then it got smashed to shit. It's now minus 155 for the under 1.5, and I think if anything, I would lean that way, but obviously would have liked it better at plus money. Almeida's finished all of his wins under 1.5 rounds. I think he has 16 wins, all of them under 1.5. Makes a ton of sense, but just missed the line there. So yeah, I don't think I'll be having a bet on this fight. Maybe the fight doesn't go as a parlay piece. Almeida, a 100% finish rate. I believe in both his wins and his losses. Maybe he's lost by decision once. Turkalj only has 1 decision win. So I think violence is the way to go, but probably a parlay piece, if anything. Weezy, what is sticking out on this one? And by the way, this is a catch weight fight at 220 pounds.
Yeah, and I've got it listed at 205, which makes sense. I mean, Turkalj's entire career has been at 205, and it's a short notice fight. So we'll call these guys 205ers. I mean, Jailton's only fighting heavyweight because nobody at the 205 pounds is willing to fight him. That's really the situation for poor Jailton at this point. So, but yeah, you mentioned it, right? Look at that number: 24 of 26 combined fights for Turkalj and Almeida have finished inside the distance, 92.31%. Turkalj's undefeated as a pro and 7 of 8 wins coming inside the distance. But up at this level, it goes to decision, doesn't it, against Acacio dos Santos? He doesn't get the finish against that guy. So very interesting fight. We can see that everything is juiced to the tits here in terms of the violence bets. 19% overpriced because fights don't go to decision at 205 about 61% of the time. We're paying 80%. Fights go under 2.5 in this division about 60% of the time. And this one is 77.78, and then also fights go under 1.5 about 45% of the time. We're paying 60. So very, very overpriced. We've got a small sample size here. And then these overs are, 14% in your favor, 11.5% in your favor, and 9.33% in your favor. These lines have moved quite a bit, like you said, Brady. If you got those unders at plus 100, good on you. You didn't overpay. But now you're probably overpaying a little bit, but my God, you know what this one might be? I might take a shot on the over 0.5 here and just hope Turkalj can last 2.5 minutes because you just don't pay minus 155 for an under 1.5. It's just a really bad, it's a really bad habit to get into. And somebody like Turkalj, who has good wrestling, might be able to keep this fight in spots where Jailton can't finish, even if he's able to get it to the ground. And I think what's really interesting here is, how is Jailton going to look if he doesn't finish his opponent in the first round? Can he push this pace for the full 3? Can he push this pace against somebody who can even wrestle a little bit? We're going to find out a lot about Jailton in this spot, but still, you got to think he wins it. You got to think it probably goes under 1.5. But I just can't bet this either way, man. We don't know if Turkalj's fully in shape here. We've got a lot of unanswered questions about Jailton Almeida, and I think it's just kind of like a big stay away from me.
Yep, I agree. I think it does go under if I had to pick, but I'm not laying minus 155 to find out for sure. Even at plus 100, I was like, Turkalj's never been finished. Turkalj's pretty solid. Like I said, a good wrestler, great cardio. I was really impressed with his cardio in the Dana White's Contender Series fight. I was kind of thinking he would not have cardio that good because he typically does finish the fight early, but no, I mean, he said he was ready for 5 rounds in that fight. So it's not like Turkalj coming in on short notice is going to completely gas out after a couple minutes. So, and he is a tough guy. So yeah, I mean, it's a pass for me. If I had to pick, it's under, but you're just minus 155. There's no way.
Yeah, and let me just say something. Turkalj said after that fight, he goes, "I thought that this was a 5-round fight." He didn't think it was a 5-round fight. That's Anton Turkalj being Anton Turkalj. The guy's, he's a funny dude. He's got a big fucking personality on him, and he was just bullshitting. But you brought it up. Look at the conditioning, and then look at the conditioning through the lens that Anton attempted 18 takedowns in that fight. I think I might be taking a look at Turkalj round 3 for this fight because he's already minus 500 on the money line. You might get 60 or 70 to 1 on Turkalj round 3. And if that conditioning does shine through and we find out that Jailton can't push that pace for a full 3 rounds, that might be something I'm looking to get there.
Yep, Turkalj round 3 plus 4,000. Turkalj round 3 knockout plus 5,000. Turkalj round 3 submission plus 7,000. Better than a draw.
Let's go, man. That's the Lou Betcha bet of the week right there. The fat prop that where you're looking for something at least plus 4,000. Turkalj round 3 is the way I'm going here. Yeah, and I mean, like if I had to put something in the PRP here, I think it would be the over 0.5.
Yeah, and then they do have that on DraftKings Sportsbook, I believe. So,
Yeah.
and DraftKings doesn't have any lines out yet. So hopefully
They've
they get
just
those
got
out.
the over-unders out. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully tonight. All right, we'll move on to the next fight. We have Hakeem Dawodu going against Julian Erosa. We have the over/under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 -160, under 2.5 +130. The fight goes decision -163. The fight doesn't go to decision as +120. This is a really weird one for me because Julian Erosa is going to go out there and make this fight a war. He's going to make it a brawl. And, he's kind of a killer be killed fighter. He goes out there, he gets finishes, or he goes out there and he gets finished. He's been finished a ton. I think he's been knocked out like 4 or 5 times, 4 in the UFC.
Mhm.
Hakeem Dawodu is not much of a finisher. It looks like he hits so hard though. Like he's landing hard on these guys. They're just not going out. If he connects clean on Erosa, maybe he does put him out. Erosa's been finished so many times. And on the flip side, Erosa, if he wins, it's probably not finished. I think I would lean towards the fight doesn't go, but it's not something I'm kind of running to the window for because Dawodu hasn't really been much of a finisher. But, I think this fight is going to have many opportunities to finish here.
Yeah, so let's look at it, right? This is the UFC finish rates for both fighters, Brady. And we see Dawodu has finished 1 of 6 wins, and he's been finished in 1 of 2 losses. So only 2 of his 8 fights have finished inside the distance. But then you bring Erosa, and it's 8 of 11. He's been finished in 4 or 5 losses. He's finished 4 of 6 wins. So it depends on whose style shines through. Which guy can Erosa drag Dawodu into a banger? I don't think Dawodu, you have to drag him kicking and screaming into a high volume kickboxing match. I think I like violence here as well, and we see 52.63% of these guys combined UFC fights have finished inside the distance, but almost 70%, have finished inside the distance as pros. So these guys are good finishers, but the most important thing is that they're both getting finished in 50% of their losses at least. So that's something that we don't mind looking at violence here. And fight doesn't go sitting at 45.45% is only overpriced by 2.54%. When we compare it to the fight doesn't go for the division at 145, it's about 42% of the fights that finish inside the distance. 42.8, what is it? 42.91% of these fights are finishing inside the distance. And we're paying 45.45%. But when we compare Erosa and Dawodu's UFC careers and how often they don't go to decision to the implied probability of the line, we see that they're going to decision they're finishing inside the distance almost 53% of the time. We're only paying 45. Look, I think that this one, Erosa is the kind of fighter that can bring the finishing abilities out of Hakeem Dawodu. We know the dude hits hard, but he's just been in a lot of split decisions. But I was talking about this with our guy, MMA Propaholic Brady, and he mentioned that a lot of these guys that Dawodu has went to decision with are extremely durable guys. Julian Erosa is not extremely durable. He's shown a better chin lately, but like we said, 4 of 5 UFC losses have been finishes, and 5 of 9 combined losses have been finishes for Erosa. So I think that that fight doesn't go at plus 120 would be the way that I would attack this one.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, you take a look at Dawodu's opponents: Trezano, very durable; Eloev, very durable; Tuhugov, very durable; Arce, very durable; Kyle Bochniak, very durable. So yeah, I mean, I agree. And Julian Erosa is not very durable. So yeah, I think at plus money, it's definitely worth a shot here, just because of the style of Julian Erosa. We know it's going to be a war. It's going to be a brawl. Erosa's one to take a couple to give a couple. So yeah, and like I said, Dawodu, he hits so hard. It's weird. He's not racking up these knockouts, but this is one where it would not shock me if he knocked out Julian Erosa. And on the flip side, Erosa is a very, very good finisher in his own right. So yeah, I think fight doesn't go plus 120 on Bovada, plus 120 on 5 Dimes, plus 120 on Betway. I think I'd definitely be looking towards some violence here.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. It's not, believe me, I'm not sprinting to the window at these lines, Brady, but it's the best bet on the board. And I mean, we can't just look at the numbers, because a lot of times you're going to see some lines that are super juiced towards one way or another. But it's like you're not necessarily betting the over 1.5 in the Tyson Pedro versus Harry Hunsucker fight, are you? Just because it's overpriced, it doesn't mean that you like basically know for a fact this thing goes under 1.5 100% of the time, but this one, we're only overpaying by 2.54%. The other numbers at 7.1 and 9.7% are good enough to say that, hey, the analytics are on our side and the stylistic matchup, with the way that Erosa fights, shades a little bit more towards violence than non-violence. So let's look at that one as a possible bet here.
Love it. All right, we'll move on. Speaking of violence, we have Ion Kudalaba going against Johnny Walker. The over-under set at 1.5 rounds. The over 1.5 is plus 120. The under 1.5 is minus 150. This is another one where I made a big mistake. I was eyeing that under 1.5 rounds at plus 105, and it just out of nowhere, it got smashed hard overnight, it looks like. And the under 1.5 is now minus 150, which is just completely unplayable. But yeah, I was very tempted on that under at plus money just because this is going to be an absolute car crash. Every Johnny Walker and Kudalaba fight are car crashes, and there's a really good chance this fight does finish probably in the very first round. The fight goes decision plus 250. The fight doesn't go to decision is only minus 325. I don't think that's a bad parlay piece. Both these guys are very good finishers, and both these guys are very good at getting finished as well. So the fight doesn't go at minus 325. I don't think that's too crazy. Maybe that as a parlay piece. But the under 1.5 is unplayable, at least for me now at minus 150.
Yeah, so both of these guys are finishing their UFC fights for and against at 66%. 6 out of 9 for Walker, 8 out of 12 for Kudalaba. So we know that number is set. Good size, a sample size of UFC fights. Both of them are finishing basically at the exact same rate. So let's look at these lines. Minus 325 for fight doesn't go is 76.47%, but only 66% of these guys' fights are finishing inside the distance. So we're kind of overpaying, by a lot here, by 9.8% when we compare the finish rates of these two fighters to the implied probability of the line. We also know that fights don't go at 205 pounds about 61% of the time, 60.9% of the time. We're paying 76. So everything here is overpriced here on the violence side, right? We can tell. Even these guys' rates against the implied probability is overpriced. So maybe we can find something over here, but boy, we're not really finding much value here either, Brady. Plus 250 for the fight goes. I would probably need a little something more than that. Over 1.5 underpriced by 8.32%. When we compare that 45.45% to the over 1.5 rate for the division, which is about almost 54%. So we take that 54%, subtract 45, we get about 8.32%. Yeah, man, I think maybe the best way to play this is just do the fight doesn't go at minus 325. Put it down there in the PRP because we're overpaying a lot for it. But it's hard to see somebody not getting finished in this one, just with the stylistic matchup. Walker's been chinny lately. Kudalaba wrestles so much that he can empty his gas tank and make himself vulnerable late in fights. Both these guys get finished at a higher rate than what they're actually finishing their opponents at the UFC level, which is weird. You don't see that very often. It's the exact same rate. 7 out of 10 wins inside the distance, 7 out of 10 losses inside the distance. So, yeah, 14 of 21 when you throw in the draw there for Kudalaba. So, yeah, this is one I'm staying away from in the time props. The violence is too overpriced. We missed the line movement there. And then the overs, they're just not hanging a big enough plus number on any of those in order for you to go running to the window. So, yeah, maybe go for the over 0.5 and put it way down in the PRP. This is not one that's sticking out for me.
Yeah, and this is one where I'm actually shocked so much money's pouring in on this under 1.5 because you can make a good case that this does go over if Kudalaba goes out there and wrestles. And what has he been doing the last 3 fights? Nothing but wrestling. So, I don't know. I think this fight does finish, though. It's hard for it to see it not finishing. but I don't know. Maybe, like you said, as a parlay piece, if anything, but nothing else really sticking out for me on that one. I think we can move on. We have Irene Aldana going against Justin Bieber. We have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The under 2.5 plus 165. The over 2.5 is minus 195. The fight goes decision minus 180. The fight doesn't go to decision is plus 150. And it looks like the fight doesn't go to decision on Betway is plus 120 there. Yeah, what does this one say, Weezy? This is a fight where I don't really want a ton to do with it. And I really don't have a strong lean one way or another, whether it goes the distance or not. We have seen Irene Aldana have some good finishing ability, honestly. We have seen Chiasson get it finished a few times. So I don't know. One I probably stay away from, but let's see what the numbers say on this one.
Yeah, so 39% of their UFC fights have finished inside the distance. That's 7 of 18. It's 3 of 10 for Aldana. It's 50% for Chiasson. But look at that number there. Only 1 of 6 losses combined coming inside the distance here for either of these ladies. So they're both pretty damn durable. The only one to get finished was Chiasson, and that was by submission at the hands of Raquel Pennington, I believe. So I kind of like the overs here. And if you look at the overs, look, they're not really overpriced. Over 1.5 at minus 350, underpriced by less than 1%. The over 2.5 at minus 195, 4.03% underpriced, and still underpriced when you compare the over 2.5 rates of the two ladies involved to the implied probability of the line. 1 out of 6 combined losses at the UFC level inside the distance. That means 2 durable fighters. So when we look to the overs and we don't see them overpriced by 5-6%, when you compare them to the benchmark, that's the line that we have to go to here. And when we compare the benchmark to the implied probability for fight goes, we're overpaying by 0.65%. When we compare those two numbers on the over 2.5, we see that we're underpaying by 4.03%. So at minus 195 for the over 2.5, that's where I would put my money for this fight. 2 durable fighters. Chiasson will tend to try to slow things down and put her opponent on the cage, which usually makes for fights going the distance, usually makes them going over. So I am liking that minus 195 over for this fight, Brady.
Sounds
fairly
good.
High on the PRP too.
All right. The over 2.5 on 5 dimes is minus 185. The fight goes is only minus 160 on 5 dimes. But yeah, on Bet Online, the over 2.5 is minus 195, and the fight goes decision is minus 180. Yeah, I think it all makes sense. I think it does more often than not go over. One that is probably a pretty good parlay piece there. All right, moving on to the next fight. We have Kevin. Is it the Kevin Holland fight first or the Ferguson fight?
It's the Holland fight first.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So we have Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez. We have the over-under set at 2.5 rounds. The over 2.5 is minus 110. The under 2.5 rounds is plus 120. Looks like we have the over 1.5 at minus 163 on Betway. The under 1.5 is plus 120. The fight goes to decision, plus 155. The fight doesn't go to decision is minus 190. And this is one that really catches my eye. Right now on Bet Online, they have the fight goes decision at plus 155. But on Betway, the fight goes to decision is only plus 120. And then on 5 dimes, the fight goes to decision is only plus 135. Both these guys are durable, next level durable, both guys. I don't believe, well, Kevin Holland's never been knocked out. He's only been submitted twice. And then Daniel Rodriguez in 18 professional fights, he's never been knocked out or submitted. Both guys are very good finishers, though. I guess it's my only concern, but it's just, I don't know. I guess I could see this fight finishing, but both these guys are so tough and so durable. I think these overs are like really good looks, and you're getting a lot of plus money there for that fight. Goes at plus 155. The over 2.5 rounds is plus money on some books as well. I'm kind of liking these overs, Weezy. What are you liking for this one?
Yeah, I just brought up the head-to-head stats to just talk about what you just talked about here, and that is that neither one of these guys has ever been knocked out in their career. And Kevin Holland has absorbed 432 significant strikes. Daniel Rodriguez, 483, and over 900 significant strikes absorbed. Only one of these guys has been even knocked down once, and that was Daniel Rodriguez by Dwight Grant. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, 2 good striking defenses here, 56% and 58%. two very durable guys. And when we look at the violence props for this fight, we can tell that they're moving. People are betting with their eyes. They're betting violence here. 16.64% overpriced when we compare the 65% implied probability to the finish rate for the division, which is actually below 50%. So we take that 49%, we subtract 65, we're getting negative 16.64%. When we compare how often these guys finish inside the distance at the UFC level, which is only 50% of the time, Brady, between Rodriguez and Holland, they're only finishing at a 50% rate. What are the bookies asking for? 65%. So we're overpriced by 15.52% there. Look, man, we got two really, really, really durable guys here. We know about 18 professional fights that Daniel Rodriguez has been in as a pro, but how many in prison, Brady? This guy was undefeated in prison, and he talks about it all the time, man. And like, this guy's been in a lot of. I don't think anybody's dropping Daniel Rodriguez, whether it's with a sack full of nickels in a shower or whether it's with 5-ounce gloves in a cage. You know, I just don't really see these guys finishing each other. And if we look at the fight goes at plus 155, right, 39.22% implied probability, Brady, we've got a 12% edge when we compare that long-term fight goes for 170 to this implied probability. And we know that these guys are going to decision 50% of their UFC fights. We're only paying 39.22%. And then look, the difference in implied probabilities between the fight goes and the over 2.5 is 13%. 13%, that's far too expensive. So this one is underpriced by 12%. The over 2.5 only underpriced by less than 3%. So, dude, plus 155. Fight goes to decision. Holland, D-Rod. Probably, no, I will say definitely my favorite bet of the week in terms of being underpriced according to the analytics, in terms of knowing for a fact that I've got two durable fighters in a division that's only finishing at a 50% rate. And these guys who have lost 6 professional fights only been finished in one of them. All right. I like that fight goes to decision at plus 155. It's my favorite bet of the week.
Yep. I mean, 48 combined fights, 0 knockout losses between the two. And yeah, like you said, D-Rod, tons of fights in prison, tons of fights on the streets. The dude's undefeated, never been knocked out there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like it. Unless I don't know. Yeah, I like it a lot. Plus 155. And what I like about that plus 155 on Bet Online is it's just so much better than all the other books out there right now. On 5 Dimes, it's plus 135. On Betway, it's only plus 120. On Bovada, it's only plus 132. So that plus 155 not only is it a great spot, but it's the best price out there by a mile compared to the other books.
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely love that one. And I'm going to ask our probability audience to hold off until after the show so that Brady and I can get our bets in. We'd like to hammer that one because that's the one that the prop template is really sticking out. Showing some good value there. In addition to that, I also like what I see with my eyes in terms of this one going over. So yeah, that's my bet of the week so far.
Yep. So I'll be on that. And then also, what are your thoughts on the over 1.5 rounds? Because I think that's a good spot as well. And it's only minus 163 on Betway.
Yeah, and you might even get better than that later on in the week. You might even be able to find that around minus 150 somewhere else later on. But the prop template likes it too. Brady, check it out. 4.74% edge here. When we compare the over 1.5 rates of Rodriguez and Holland at the UFC level to the 62% implied probability of the line, it's telling us that they've been over 66.67% of the time. So it's an underpriced line as well, and I think it goes over 1.5 minus 163 could be another great way to play this fight.
Yeah, I know Mushroom does those like violence ladders. I might do like the reverse violence ladder, that over 1.5, that fight goes decision. I might just play them both there.
Yeah, why not, Brady? Hey, you already pulled the reverse Collier, right? So why not do the reverse violence ladder in this particular fight on a week when Jake Collier is fighting? I mean, it's kismet. It can't fail.
Just makes too much sense. I like it.
Exactly.
All right. We both like that spot a lot. So probably gonna be a bet for both of us, honestly. All right. Next we have this is my only bet of the week. We have the Li Jingliang going against Tony Ferguson. The over 2.5 -105. The under 2.5 is -125. The fight goes decision -105. The fight doesn't go decision is -125. I did pull the trigger on the fight doesn't go at -110. So yesterday they had the fight doesn't go at -110. And then Bet Online had the under 2.5 rounds at like -125. So it didn't make a ton of sense. I figured I'd be a lot of line movement. And this one is a fight where, when you think of Ferguson, you typically think of that durability. But he is coming up a weight class here late in his career. You don't like to see that. He got knocked out brutally. And it doesn't feel like that was too long ago when he got knocked out. It seems just like a couple months ago, knocked out brutally. He had that war against Justin Gaethje, which it looks like that war just took a ton out of him. I think this may be the last time we see Tony Ferguson in there. He's on a pretty big losing streak, and the Leech is a fighter that hits like an absolute truck. He does hit harder than Michael Chandler. So I feel like the Leech probably goes out there and knocks out Tony Ferguson. If Ferguson does win, maybe he gets the fight down to the mat, finds a submission. The Leech has been submitted a couple times, but you take a look at the Leech, and when he is winning fights, he is winning them by knocked out Muslim Salikov, knocked out Ponzinibbio, knocked out Elijah Zaleski dos Santos, and these are very durable guys. Like Salikov, super durable, Ponzi, super durable, dos Santos, super. Like nobody's knocking these guys out besides the Leech. So I'm a big Ferguson fan. But man, I think the guy is on his way out. So the fight doesn't go -110. I did pull the trigger, and there has been some money coming on that as the week has went on. So Weezy, what is sticking out here in terms of the numbers?
Yeah, it's a strange one, right? Because you mentioned the historical durability of Tony Ferguson, but this is the late 30s version of Tony Ferguson here that's on a 4-fight losing streak. So what more can we expect out of him in terms of the durability? Let's take a look at the UFC numbers because we got a great sample size of fights here, right? 58 professional fights, 36 UFC fights between Lee and Ferguson here. And we see that the finish rate at the UFC level is sitting just a little bit below 64%. So it's like about a -200 almost, maybe -190-ish, and 67.24% overall. Now we're paying only -125 for the fight doesn't go to decision here. So when we compare the finish rates of Ferguson and Lee at the UFC level, and we subtract that 55.56%, we're getting an 8.33% edge there. That's not bad at all. And then we also see that if we're getting the same line, -125 for under 2.5, -125 for fight doesn't go to decision, don't you dare bet that under 2.5. You take those extra 2.5 minutes every time and bet the fight doesn't go. So fight doesn't go to decision at -125, underpriced by 8.33% when you compare Lee and Ferguson's finish rates to the implied probability of the line, underpriced by 15% when you compare the finish rates of these two fighters to the divisional finish rate, which is going to be 66% compared to the 51% finish rate for 170. So we're getting a couple of good prices here. We also see, since it's priced the same as the under 2.5, that there's value there as well. And like you mentioned, this is 170. So Tony is a guy who has trusted his chin for years at 155. He's been a very hittable fighter. It's just that he's trusted his chin for a very long time. It's been a big part of why he's been able to win fights, because he's got fantastic conditioning and fantastic durability, and he can actually, in the second half of a fight, use that conditioning to turn up the pace on fighters who thought they were going to finish him but were unable to. But now you got a guy in Lee. Like you mentioned, he finished Ponzinibbio. I think he's the only UFC fighter to finish Ponzinibbio, right? Every other Ponzinibbio loss has been by decision. So if he's finishing, a durable 170-pounder, can he finish a 155-pounder on a 4-fight losing streak coming off a savage knockout at the hands, or I should say the foot of Michael Chandler? Yeah, I got to go with the violence here. When we go over here to the other side, Brady, we see that these over bets underpriced by 3.08% for the over 1.5, underpriced by 4% for the over 2.5, underpriced by 5.67% for the fight goes. But when we take the individual fighter rates and compare them to the implied probability of the line and the divisional finish rates, we're overpaying. So I would have to say fight doesn't go here at minus 125 is my favorite way to play this one.
Yep, that is my only bet of the week. So hopefully it works out. On 5 dimes, they do have the fight doesn't go at minus 150. On Betway, they have the fight doesn't go at minus 138. So Bet Online does have by far the best price. And somebody said, Raul Torque said Brady gets $50 every time he says Betway. So Betway. Give me my money.
Unofficial sponsor of Probability. Betway.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Every time
you're not paying us shit, unfortunately.
Oh, no, not at all. Every time I say it, we should be paid for saying 5 dimes. We say 5 dimes like 20 million times a week. So
we say I wish I had 5 dimes like 500 times a week. Yeah. So yeah, get just 5 dimes. Give us an account for the love of Jah. We will scream from the rooftops how awesome your lines are.
Oh yeah, they're very awesome. All right, we'll keep moving on to the main event. Khamzat Chimaev going against Nate Diaz. We have the over-under is set at, I actually don't know, because on fight odds, they don't have any of the lines out. So I'm going to go to our best fight odds, but on fightodds.io, they do have the lines. So the over 1.5 is minus 165 on Bet Online. The under 1.5 is plus 165. The fight goes to decision on Bet Online is plus 375. And the fight doesn't go decision on Bet Online is minus 550. On FanDuel Sportsbook, I told you this Weezy yesterday. I'm not sure if it's still there, but on FanDuel Sportsbook, they had the fight doesn't go decision at like minus 1375, and the fight goes decision at, I think, plus 520. That was on FanDuel. But yeah, this is a fight where I was thinking maybe people come in and hammer this over 1.5. Just, Nate Diaz, very, very durable. And I think he does at least maybe survive the first round, but I don't see this lasting 10 minutes. I was kind of looking at the under 2.5 rounds alternative, and it looks like on 5 dimes it's minus 162, something like that. So yeah, I'm looking at the under 2.5 at the moment, but there's no line out on that on Bet Online or actually Bovada does have it, but it's just overpriced. And then on DraftKings, nothing yet. But I'm going to be taking a look at the under 2.5. Outside of that, probably nothing really sticking out. The fight doesn't go. It's juice to the tits, but for a very, very good reason, I think. Weezy, what's sticking out in the main event here?
I'll bet you this fight doesn't go to decision, Brady.
Okay.
And let's check it out here. Analytics, 5-round fights in the 170-pound division. So this is 5 rounds here. And here we got welterweight. Wow, for 5 rounds, welterweight fights only finish inside the distance 48.39% of the time. And we're paying
a lot.
We're paying 84%. My God, man. Dude, it's almost like, look at that. I mean, when we take that fight goes to decision at plus 375, right? And of course, it's not going. I mean, if it goes to decision, that would be a miracle, in my opinion. But 30% underpriced, 24% underpriced when you compare Nate Diaz's career of fights going to decision and with Chimaev in there to the implied probability of this line. So these guys are actually going to decision about 45% of the time on the whole, but we're only paying 21%. But look, this is a fight with an aging fighter in Nate Diaz who has really bad takedown defense, and we've seen him just beaten up on the ground before. And now he's going to be getting beaten up by a guy who's much younger than him, is just absolutely a terrifying human being to share a cage with. And, this is, I think this one goes under 1.5 easily. I think Khamzat's going to fucking maul this dude. And I don't think it's going to be pretty. This is a really bad way for Nate Diaz to end his UFC career.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more. So yeah, I mean, bets I'm looking at are going to be the under 2.5. The fight won't start round 3, just because I really struggle to see this fight lasting 10 minutes. Chimaev, his last fight against Gilbert Burns, I believe was the very first fight he's ever been over 1.5 rounds, and he did hurt Burns really bad. He dropped him, and yeah, I just feel like Chimaev can go out there and just do whatever he wants. I mean, if he wants to knock out Diaz on the feet, I think that's a possibility. The guy hits very hard. I did not like how Diaz was reacting to the power of Jorge Masvidal. And yeah, if he wants to take him down, pound him out, I feel like it's on the table as well. So if this fight does last that long, it probably gets interesting, right? Because Chimaev's gas tank's not great. I mean, it's not as bad as I thought it would be. He showed it off in the Burns fight a little bit, but he was clearly slowing down. I can't imagine this fight getting too extended. So right now, the fight won't start round 3 on FanDuel is minus 164. I'm curious to see what DraftKings gets that out at. But yeah, the under 2.5, especially get that extra half round. I would like that. I'd be shocked if this fight lasted 12.5 minutes. So I'm going to be looking at those, Weezy. But yeah, outside of that, nothing else really sticking out. I know there's a lot of props out there that are pretty popular. I saw that Chimaev by knockout was like plus 115 on FanDuel. That just got hit. So yeah, I think I'm just gonna be taking a look at it from like an under 2.5 perspective.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad look. Fight doesn't start round 3, under 2.5. Those are solid looks. And stylistically, what I think is going to happen here is what we've seen Khamzat do in a number of different fights, and that's just shoot a takedown in the first 5 seconds.
Yeah, be smart.
I mean, if he does that, he's got 4 minutes and 55 seconds to work because Nate's not getting up. Okay, and I think he's just going to pound his head through the canvas. I really do. This guy's ground and pound is just a completely different level. And please, I understand Nate Diaz's jiu-jitsu was fantastic back in 2004. It's 2022, you guys. You're not catching dudes in triangle chokes from guard, especially not Khamzat. You put your legs around his neck, you're going to stand up and spin you around like a helicopter and launch you into the upper deck. So, this is going to be Khamzat. I'm going to be looking for violence here. And Propaholic just said it in the chat. Fight ends by KO at minus 105. Just got to worry about the submission. But, I mean, I think he's going to pound this dude's head. So I kind of like that fight ends by KO at minus 105.
Yep. I do think that got hit recently, though. But,
okay.
Yeah, I was looking at that as well. But
what's the under 2.5? Can we still get that at minus 150?
No, under 2.5?
Yeah.
On 5 dimes, it's minus 162, and that's the only book that has it out right now. So
okay, yeah, that's probably what I'd look at. I'd look at minus 162 seems very fair for that. But you have to keep in mind that this is odd because you look at these finish rates, right? For 5-round fights, 79% for heavyweight, 73.5% for light heavyweight, 58% for middleweight, and then it goes down to 48% for welterweight, and then bumps right back up to 71. So by far the lowest finishing division. I mean, even the straw weights, women's straw weights finish at a higher percentage in 5-round fights than men's welterweights do. How do you like that, dude? Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
That's why it's fun to look at these analytics from time to time. But still, man, I think that this is Khamzat. I think it's Khamzat under 2.5. I think he probably even gets it done in the first.
Yeah, or like a doctor stoppage at the end of the first round. Like Nate's gonna be cut up.
Yeah, I mean, when they put the Vaseline on Nate's head, he starts spurting blood out of his forehead. The guy has so much scar tissue. He's going to be opened up early in this fight.
Sounds good. All right, we did it. We went through all 13 fights. All that's left now is we're going to talk about the spots that really stuck out. I actually took some notes as well, so I'll talk about mine. You can talk about yours, and then we'll make a PRP or a probability parlay, PP.
Beautiful. I've got some spots that I'm looking at here. I like that over 1.5 in the Weeks Lianes fight at minus 163. It's going to be a little bit of a sweat. Lianes has got a lot of power, but we can count on Weeks' durability, and we can also count on Weeks' wrestling to perhaps take down Lianes if he doesn't like how it's going on the feet. We've got a few plus money spots that I like here, but in terms of a PRP, I'm liking that over 2.5 for Aldana against Chiasson at minus 195. I wouldn't mind parlaying that with the over 1.5 for Weeks Lianes. And then just in terms of a straight bet, because it's plus 155, that Holland D-Rod fight goes to decision at plus 155 is one of my favorite bets of the week.
Yep, I like that as well. Looks like you said the over 1.5 in the Lianes fight?
Yes.
So the over 2.5 in the Justin Bieber fight parlayed with the over 1.5 in the Weeks fight. That is plus 144.
Plus 144. I like that, man. I think I'm going to play that.
Yep, and some of the spots I liked were the Lioness Weeks over 1.5, like you, minus 155. Don't mind a sprinkle on the Dumont fight doesn't go, plus 150, or Dumont inside the distance, plus 200. She should have a big advantage on the mat if she decides to take it there. The minus 120 fight doesn't go in the Collier Barnett fight. Going to be hilarious.
Yeah.
Dawodu Erosa fight doesn't go, plus 120. I didn't mind. Rodriguez fight goes decision, plus 155. And then also going to be taking a look at the over 1.5. And then the Chimaev Diaz under 2.5 of the fight won't start round 3. Those are the spots I'm going to be looking at for straight bets. But yeah, the parlay, the over 2.5 in the Justin Bieber Aldana fight, and then also the over 1.5 in the Lioness Weeks fight. 2 overs, plus 144. Pretty solid spot there.
Yeah, over 1.5, over 2.5, parlay that for plus 144. And then I'm definitely betting the plus 155 Holland D-Rod fight goes to decision. And then, like you said, under 2.5 Chimaev Diaz. Fight doesn't go to decision, Lee Ferguson. Fight doesn't go to decision, Erosa Dawodu. Under 2.5, Pickett Tiuliulin. Fight doesn't go to decision, Fat Collier against Fat Barnett. Fight doesn't go to decision, plus 150, Dumont Wolfe. And the over 2.5 in the Elise Reed Super Melly fight.
Let's go. I like it. Lots of good spots. Glad to talk it through. I feel a lot better about some of these spots after talking it through with you and with the numbers and with the chat as well. I do have a donation before we get out. Go Flamingo with the $5 dono saying Coward Bookies only have props out on the Diaz Khamzat in my part of the world. That is shame on them, especially on a pay-per-view card. But perspective, I'm just so happy Brady is out of the hospital. I am out of the hospital, was in the hospital on stat diggers, right? And also hit up the strip club as well. So thank you, Gogo, for the dono. Thank you for hanging out. Thank all of you for hanging out. If you guys have not already, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep growing this MMA engine. Weezy, let the people know where they can find you, what you have going on throughout the week. I know that you are going live tonight. I believe you're going live tonight still, right? For Just a Tip?
Yeah, so I've got a fantasy football draft that starts at 8 o'clock my time. So I'm going to be pushing back Just the Tip 1 hour tonight. So we're going to start at 11 o'clock Central Time, midnight Eastern. But yeah, it's that weird week, Brady, where everybody's got their fantasy football stuff going on, Labor Day weekend, a lot of things going on in people's personal lives. So yeah, it's been an odd week. We got probability out a day late this week. I'm going to be an hour late on Just the Tip tonight. But yeah, check me out tonight. Uncle Weezy's YouTube channel, Just the Tip. Wednesday night, you can check me out on my channel as well for the Ask Weezy. We'll also be doing the DFS show on Pub Sports Radio on Wednesday. And then also I'll be a guest on Addicted to Combat show tomorrow night about 8:30 Eastern, I believe, for his best bet show. So I'm going to be a busy man this week. Looking forward to week 1 of football too, Brady, and looking forward to stacking cash tickets like flapjacks for UFC Vegas 279. Or not Vegas, UFC 279 here. And we found some good spots here, I think.
Yes, sir. Got NFL coming up. They have a really good Thursday. I think the Thursday game isn't the Rams, the Bills. I think it's going to be a fun one. So
great matchup, man.
For the first game of the season, I'm definitely looking forward to it. All right, guys, you can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the numbers. If you guys are looking for some Dana White's Contender Series, was not able to get a live stream out on the MMA Engine, but I was able to put together a quick video on my channel, DFS by the numbers. Lou Betcha should be back in the very near future. Maybe not this week, but next week, Lou should be back. Here he's doing a little bit better, so that's good. But yeah, guys, leave us a like, subscribe, all the good stuff. We'll talk to you guys very soon, and best of luck for UFC 279. See you guys.